you get these two guys from?
Hello and welcome to episode 1 of the Tackling Sport podcast. I'm your host Daniel Hussey alongside my brother Shaun here.
How's it going?
And Tackling Sport podcast is the new sport podcast where every Monday we want to bring you a different insight into the world of sport. So we're going to be chatting to players, agents, referees and everyone in between, really, with a slight twist that we do want to talk to as many people that you may not hear from all the time. Shaun, what are your aims for the podcast over the next few weeks and months?
Yeah, like I said, we just want to tell those untold stories to hear from people you mightn't necessarily hear from, people that had big careers, people that had careers cut short because of injury, people that are at the top of their game but we again might necessarily hear from. So we're just trying to do that. It's an interactive show. We want to hear from you, we want to hear from our listeners, and we want to see and talk about as many topics and as many untold stories as possible.
Sounds good, Shaun. Yeah, so episode 1 we are joined by our uncle Patrick Deane, who's 25 years experience advising professional footballers and is currently a football agent at Quorum Sports. Good chat with Pat. Shaun, what did we find interesting and for our listeners to keep an eye on?
What we found interesting about how he got into agency, he worked as an advisor for a big agency over there in England, and what his takes are on Irish football, how he sees it, what are the most important things for young players and experienced players, and the different contracts. I think you might hear, but I think there's only 150 pay slips a footballer gets, so it's very interesting. We always see about professional footballers, but we don't necessarily hear about the business side of football, and Pat has got a great football brain, he's got a great business brain, and the two of them work really well in this podcast.
Sounds good. Stay tuned to the end to find out why he still holds a grudge against Shaun Maloney. More, that will become clear later on. So let's get to our chat. And we're delighted to be joined by football agent with Quorum Sports, co-founder of the Football Agency Network, and over 25 years experience of advising professional footballers. Pat Deane, welcome to the podcast. How are we?
How are you guys? All right?
All good, all good.
Not too bad, we're keeping well. Listen, Pat, we wanted to get you on just to have a chat really about, if you want to tell us a little bit about how you got involved with footballers, maybe first as a financial advisor and now a football agent.
Yeah, it was the mid-90s in London. I used to work for Irish Life, believe it or not, and they pulled out of the UK. I got headhunted by a company who, alongside it, was setting up a football agency, and it was, you know, early doors. There wasn't too many football agents around in the mid-90s. There was a few, and as they sort of grew, I got more and more involved in all aspects of the footballers' lives, from everything to doing their insurance for career ending, to their investments, to buying houses for them when they move clubs, to negotiating for the price of the house. And then, you know, with all the other stuff that, you know, players have to, you know, go through life, a few divorces and stuff like that. And I just got more and more heavily involved, where the majority of my clients were professional players, and I had a few other sports, but 90% was football players.
Brilliant. And what made you then make the step from the financial advising initially to the football agent?
Years ago, there was a requirement that you had to pass the FIFA football agents exam, and it was notoriously a hard exam to pass. It had a sort of a 94-95% fail rate, and it was their way of keeping the numbers of agents down. And because I had experience in passing exams for financial services, pensions, and all those sort of exams, I decided to get my teeth into it, and I took it and passed it first time round. And you were then probably one of only 300 agents in the UK. Then now there's over 2,500, because they deregulated it in 2015. So, and when I made the jump, I enjoyed it more. It was it's a cross between a mentoring role, I'm pretty good at contract negotiations, and looking and planning it, because you're going through a career of a player. You might have looked at say over 100 contracts, whereas a player would only look at that one contract in front of him. He doesn't know what things need to be added, what things would help his career down the line if certain clauses were in. So it was just a natural step for me to sort of get a group of players that I look after, and I was their agent. So that was it.
Brilliant. And in terms of the Quorum Sports, how did that come about?
Well, the previous company I was associated with ended up having over 500 players, which was, very hard to provide sort of the service levels that a lot of these players need and deserve. And quorum means chosen few in Latin. And when I was, believe it or not, at Irish Life, they had a quorum club for their top agents in the UK, and it was one of my old, something that was that I liked the sound of many years ago, and I thought if I had my own agency, I'm going to call it Quorum. So
brilliant. And you mentioned services, Pat, and you kind of talked a little bit about it. But if I'm a player, what services am I looking for from my agent?
Depending on your age. So legally in England, you have to be basically 16 before you and your parents can sign a representative contract with an agency. The first step, if you're a good player and you're looking for proper advice, is the whole process of, if it's an Irish player going over to England, which category academy you're going to go to. Do they have an under 23s? If you're a late developer, a lot of clubs only have an under 18s. So if there's not a 23s, it's less likely that more likely going to let you go unless you're close to the first team. So what you're providing the younger players is basically experience in terms of what for them to expect. So, do they go out on loan when they're 18, 19? If they do go out on loan, what sort of club do they go out to? The sort of digs that they stay in. Some clubs have like mini hotels that all the boys have their own room in this mini hotel. And a lot of clubs, majority of clubs would have families that 2 or 3 players would stay with. So the younger players, it's mainly to do with letting them know what they're going to expect and what is required of them when they do go. What makes a professional a club offer a player a sort of a good long-term contract with that club, because there is a lot of players who, unfortunately get let go, but it doesn't mean that's the end of their career either. That just means it wasn't suited at that particular club. And the higher club you go, of course, the harder it is to get anywhere near the first team. The older players, the ones who are sort of say between 18 and 22, which we have a lot of those players, is where they're looking for opportunities. And because we have a wide network of contacts across realistically Europe and abroad, we can help some players basically get over that bridge of academy to first team. It doesn't have to be academy to championship or academy to premiership. Sometimes they have to go to abroad to cut their teeth, to get the experience, to get their 2,000 minutes a season, to get their stats up, to get to grow, and then come back, and then they all seem to gravitate back to their league in England and want to prove that they can do it in the championship or the premiership. So they're the ones that we are very active with. There's, like I said, 18 to 21, where they need options for their careers. The older boys, we basically, we know the good thing is we know what clubs pay, and what you don't want to be is going in there and your player then ends up being in the bottom quartile of wages because you believe what the club said about budgets, etc. So we're pretty good like that, and that's where myself and my partner Emre Varadi, between the two of us, we got over 40 years experience in contracts, and that's really sort of helps us differentiate ourselves against a lot of the competition out there.
So Pat, there you said that when you're at a 18 or 21 at a Premier League club or a Championship club in the academy, it's hard to get through. Talk to me about someone like Kieran Sadler. He's been one of your players now for a few years. He was at West Ham, came to Sligo to further his career.
Kieran is probably a very good example to players about never give up. He was a roommate with Shaun Maguire in West Ham, and they were best friends. And they both got released April 2015, and they both did their different journeys, and they're both now, having big futures ahead of them. With Kieran, he went up to Scotland. St Mirren got relegated. He then went to Peterborough, couldn't get into the team at Peterborough. One of his old managers, Dave Robertson, got the Sligo Rovers job, picked the phone up to Kieran and said, look, come over to the west of Ireland with me. This is where you can grow. You can learn the game, learn men's football. And he had a blistering start. I don't know exactly what his stats were, but he started scoring plenty of goals. Goal ratio was very strong, and he had it was a perfect place for him, Sligo Rovers, to cut his teeth, to be a professional. He attracted a lot of attention at the time from the other League of Ireland clubs, and Cork City come in and paid a transfer fee for him and for his services for a year and a half. And he went there. He won trophies there under John Caulfield, and again, he moved up that ladder. When he was just turning 24, he was out of contract, so he was a Bosman. Again, he wanted to gravitate back to England and prove that he could do it in the league in England. And we had 4 different clubs after him, and the one that he wanted to go with was Doncaster. He knew the manager, Grant McCann, from his Peterborough days, so that helped. And he was only sort of an hour and a half from where his parents lived, which was, again, a big help. And he's had a brilliant, brilliant, I think it's 15 goals in 58 games at Doncaster Rovers. And this season, I know it was cut short, but he was, 12 goals, 6 assists, again, in a short season, which was unbelievable. We've now got to sit down with his family and Kieran and talk about the options that will come his way in the next few weeks.
You mentioned a lot about first team, and I suppose Kieran Sadler would be a great example. Why is that so important? Is it differentiate yourself against players that might be in larger academies?
Yeah, if you're in an academy and you're playing a top level, absolutely you get the scouts watching you, you get a bit of coverage. If it's a lower level, there's not many people there, there's no atmosphere there. You're not playing men. If you lose, the manager's not going to get sacked. Whereas if you go lower leagues or even conference, it's real 3 points on a Saturday afternoon, where, people have, worked all week and they want to spend their time on a Saturday watching their local side do well. And if you can go in there and do a good job for them, they'll follow your career all the way back up, So whereas in the 23s, like I said, it's there to develop, but the big development from what the players tell me and the feedback I get is they learn more from playing men's football, senior football.
Yeah, another one of your players who did that was Darragh O'Shea. He went to Exeter and
Hereford.
And Hereford.
He went to Hereford, which was, conference football. But he was because it was conference, he was allowed to train with West Brom during the week and play games for Hereford at weekends. And he did over 40 games, I think 46 games. So he had a fantastic season there, and he loved every minute of it. And because he did the 40 games there, it enabled Matty Taylor, the Exeter manager, to believe in him and have a reference point for him to. I think he did 30 games for Exeter last season. So yeah, it does make a big difference.
And with the first team, you mentioned the lower leagues in England. You actually have a lot of players like Sadler that have come to the League of Ireland and played games, and you actually look after a lot of Irish players.
Yeah, the League of Ireland is a great place for younger players who want to make a name for themselves. It offers there's a lot of clubs that are professional all the way, so it gives them, that sense of professionalism, that they train every day. The crowds are good. Okay, we're all going through a crisis at the moment, but League of Ireland, I think the opportunities within the League of Ireland for a lot of players, even English players coming over to go on loan to the League of Ireland, the managers are brave to play younger players in the league, and that is again can make a big difference to. Like we look after Conor McCarthy. Conor made his debut at Cork City. He came in from the 19s. He probably did 50, 60 games for Cork City. He's now gone to St Mirren, but those 50, 60 games and the experience he got down at Cork City has set him up, gave him a great grounding,
And
So
probably 5 or 6 years ago, if you were an English club looking at the League of Ireland, you'd go, well, you don't know where to stand at. But because of the likes of Stephen Kenny and because of John Caulfield's Cork, people are looking at the League of Ireland now. I heard Gary Neville, when he was in Ireland, talking about how Salford were looking to get a League of Ireland player, rumoured to be Jack Byrne. But that's the growth in the League of Ireland, and it's only a plus.
Yeah, and the more players that go over and make their mark in the league, and they can. It could be a player that when he's 16 goes to England, it doesn't work out for whatever reason, comes back to the League of Ireland. It gives him that experience again, that good season under his belt. He can then go straight back to England. If they have a never say die attitude, then honestly, it can happen. I've lots of examples of that. So the perception of the League of Ireland in England now is definitely getting better.
And going back to players and agreements with clubs, Pat, obviously you hear a lot in the media about someone's on, say, 100 grand a week at the top end. What would be the breakdown of that in terms of, would there be bonuses, or is it just a base salary, or how does it work?
If a player's in the Premiership, they would have a part of their money would be for the images. So they would have been a normal contract. The image part of a normal contract would have been pulled out, and there'd be a separate image rights agreement for the top Premiership boys. So that could be payable twice a year. That would be paid by the club to their image rights. Players would also then have a very healthy bonus built in. So they'll have the basic wage, which if they're injured, they still get paid. In England, it's quite fair, because if you're injured in England, you get paid for 18 months. If you're injured in Germany, you only get paid for 6 weeks. So different leagues have different rules. So if somebody has a healthy bonus, have a healthy basic, but they get if they're injured, if they have an ACL or a broken leg or something like that, they're in a better position than they would be with players in the Bundesliga, where they would have to take out separate insurance to cover sort of a 2 or 3 month injury. So having a strong basic is important. Of course, if they make appearances, there's always an appearance fee. How well if they win the Champions League qualification, they're going to get a bonus for that. So there's a lot of different variables,
Okay.
And then a player could also, part of the deal could be a signing on fee as well, which is again as a lump sum that gets payable through the duration of the contract.
And in terms of transfer fees, what would be the breakdown there? Again, thinking of the big cases where you see 80 million for a player, how does that break down in terms of, does the club receive it at once?
Well, there's whole different factors out there now. There's a whole sort of financial funds that will come into say a buying club wants to pay in instalments over, say, 4 years, but the selling club wants the money up front. They sell the contract to a fund who charges them 4 or 5% interest. That's very commonplace now, because some clubs, cash flow is important. So, having it paid in 2022, 2023 is great, but they need it in 2020 and 2021. So there's a lot more. If a deal's over 10 million, you're going to find that there'll be payment plans in place. But if it's a European club with European TV money backing the deal, there's plenty of lenders out there that would lend the clubs the money. Generally speaking, clubs that would receive the bulk of the money. There might be a sell-on to a previous club. So if what you'll see sometimes is the smaller league clubs, when they sell a player into the championship, they would then build in a sort of 15 to 25% sell-on, that if that club then has another move in it, they get a second bite of the cherry. So apart from that, the player doesn't get any of that money. And I know you're talking about the Pogba case. That was a sort of a freak, the way it was set up. The agent got such a big chunk of it, but that's not normally the case.
So Pat, for example, someone like Darragh O'Shea, who was at Temple Ogue United before going to Kevin's, would a lot of people would say Temple Ogue or Kevin's deserve some of the transfer fees that Darragh O'Shea would make, and would the clubs like that get money from, say, West Brom?
There would be an arrangement when he first went to West Brom, and that would have been, based on the original transfer and the original, when he got his first pro deal. There is a solidarity payment which is payable on a transfer fee for the big boys. So if Darragh gets sold on to a super club and there's big money, then there'll be a solidarity. Part of that transfer fee will be paid into the solidarity fund, which will then be divided up to the clubs that looked after him up until he was 16.
In terms of the players, going back to the players, how many would you have on the books at the moment, and what's the kind of breakdown in terms of players you have in the Championship?
We've got we're under Quorum. We've got probably 30 players, and we have some older pros. We got the David Wheaters and the Richard Woods, who are club captains. Richard just got a promotion into the Championship with Rotherham. He's a club captain there. David Wheater's a character. He's been around. Still a few years left in his legs. But then we've also got the young boys coming through. We look after Alan Brown at Preston, who has had a fantastic career. 200 games plus he's had for Preston from his transfer from Cork, and he's again an Irish international. So we've taken Zach El-Zaboudi to Lincoln from Waterford. He's a great player, an under 21. The Irish under 21s table's out now. So there's 3 very, very important games for 3 of the players in that squad. We've got Darragh O'Shea, Danny Grant, and Zach El-Zaboudi. We look after a lot of League of Ireland players, but we've got players in Scotland playing in the SPL. We've got players in League 2, League 1, and the Championship. So hopefully next year we'll have Darragh playing in the Premiership with West Bromwich Albion.
So Pat, when you're going to a player and you see a 17 or 18-year-old, and from word of mouth people are saying, "Oh, Quorum Sports, I've heard good things about them. They look after their players." How do you then go to the family, and what do you find the families are looking for the most from an agent?
Well, our tagline in our company, and we have it on our business card, is powered by experience. What we have, myself and my partner Imre played. He had an 18-year career. He played for Newcastle, Man City, Everton, Sheffield United, Sheffield Wednesday, Leeds United, West Bromwich Albion, Rotherham. He's been there, seen it and done it, and he's been 20 years an agent. And I worked with Imre for probably since 2004, and he brings a lot of football experience to the table. I'd never played football, but I was more on the financial side, which is, players have a short career. If they're lucky, they're going to get 120 to 150 paychecks, and they've got to make that last their life. So that's where my experience comes in, and you've seen lots of stories about players who, when they retire, the money that they've earned as they've had a great time. They've had 25 different cars and 55 different holidays and 120 watches, but they've got not enough assets behind them. So it's very important to, realise that the players have to put aside money. They've got to think about their retirement, even though they're 20, 21, 22, 23, thinking it goes on forever. So between Imre on the football front and his contacts and my contacts over the last 20 years, we bring a lot of common sense to the table. I suppose that's it. We wouldn't be on Snapchat with the players. We'd be more, the serious side of the game.
And in terms of then the education for a player, because obviously sometimes it may not work out for them, how do you guys look after that for a player?
We don't. Majority of the time, the players have, got their families around them. There's a lot of players like Conor O'Malley. He's gone back to Ireland now from 3 years at Peterborough, but he did his exams before he went to England. So we're finding a lot of that happening, where you don't have to go over to England at 16. So a lot of the players who are playing for the League of Ireland clubs are in the meantime doing degrees, and whether it's at university down in Cork or Maynooth or wherever, the clubs in the League of Ireland are doing a really good job to help players with sort of scholarships type bursaries,
And that talked to us about someone like Michael Kennedy. For those who don't know, Michael was an under-21 international for Northern Ireland. He was over at Charlton rather from a young age. And recently had to retire, aged just 23. Maybe talk to us about him.
Well, Michael's got a fantastic, strong personality, and he was able to come through two really, really bad injuries. He had. Charlton were very good with him. They did as much as they possibly can, but Mikel a couple of months ago decided he has to basically come back to Ireland and retire from professional football. Somebody like that now, he's got football in his blood. So whether he goes into be a physio, or whether he goes into be a coach, or whether he goes into the agency side of the game, he's got. He unfortunately, the injuries cut short a very, very, very promising career with Mikel. Very, honestly, it's a real shame. But we're in contact. Even during lockdown, we had a couple of Zoom calls with Mikel, and he's somebody who's going to be very, very much associated with Quorum for a very long time. Even though he can't, he's not going to be on the pitch. But listen. He's got grit and determination, and he was very, very mentally strong, and he took the hits.
You mentioned kind of Zoom calls that you're going to have to do at the moment, Pat. I know previously you were traveling a lot, watching players. How is that all going to change now with the current situation?
Well, absolutely, yeah. Scouts and family aren't allowed into games, so until there's a back to normal within football, and they allow crowds back, whether it be at 25% or whether it be limited on a strict number, it's going to be very hard to get to games. But what's happened, the upside is the feeds for the games are now going to be like, I think, League of Ireland starting at the end of July. And I think what's going to happen now is there's going to be games not all on a Friday. There's going to be, I presume, the feeds, the people that are going to be broadcasting it. So of course, we'll be watching all the games, and I think it could be a good revenue, because there's a lot of people who live across Europe, who live, a lot of the big expat community who would want to follow Galway play, who would want to follow Dundalk, and for them to pay £10 or a season pass, it's their entertainment. They do it for Netflix. They'll do it to support their local team. So we'll be watching it from afar until we're allowed back in again. We're allowed back in the training camps or the academies or the grounds.
You've had a I know personally, when I've been speaking with you, you've had a lot of opinions on Irish football. For someone that's lived in England and been involved in English football for a long time, what are the big concerns you see at the development of Irish football? I mean, obviously we've seen the growth in League of Ireland in the last few years, but if you're looking and saying, what are the big jobs ahead of the FEI in terms of schoolboy football right the way through to the League of Ireland?
I would say that a change is needed. The focus I would have it would be on the stadium. You go to Tala, and that would, the facilities there are second to none, and they're building another stand, so it's even going to make the stadium even more impressive. And that should be the blueprint. There should be, stadiums of that caliber, maybe not that size, across Ireland. Because that's the difference. You could go to a League Two stadium. No, not all of them are great in England, but you go to a League Two stadium, and it could be there could be some really impressive stadiums there. It's, the facilities are there. Unfortunately, in Ireland, they're not, and I don't know whether it's lack of investment over the last sort of like 20, 30 years, or whatever. The stadiums need to be improved dramatically. Even to ladies' toilets, the cleanliness and stuff like that. I've always, you've got to be, the women's game is important. It's very important to get women fans to the games, women football. So you've got to turn the old sort of older stadiums, which weren't really geared for families, and they need to be upgraded definitely. Football, they've changed the system now. You've gone from the schoolboy clubs to the clubs. I don't think I would have a strong opinion, because I can see both sides of the argument on that. I can see the schoolboy clubs, the Kevins, all the St. Francis's, and all those sort of clubs did a brilliant job, an absolutely brilliant job to bring the players through, and there's a lot of really good examples of players playing in England who came from those sort of clubs. But then I've also seen the 15s and the 17s. Probably, I think there needs to be subsidies available to have a schoolboy club for 15 and 17s is expensive for a club, because there's no revenue coming in other than if they sell a player to another country. But I think the cost to the clubs is quite enormous, actually. But it does, a lot of it has worked again for some clubs that they, I look at. I went to a lot of the court games, and their 17s play in their training centre, and it's a great pitch down there. And it's sort of, but there are players who have to travel a long way to get there, whereas the schoolboy clubs were just around the corner, and they were more locally based, so the parents didn't have to drive as far. But the League of Ireland just needs, whether this new thing about the All Ireland League comes to fruition, I'd probably be pro that, because I think that would put Ireland on a bigger stage, especially if it is summer football, because as we all know now, we've had 3 months without football, and a lot of people have gone stir crazy, and there's a big market to watch summer football. Finland has summer football, and it's all broadcast to the Far East, and there's no reason why Ireland's summer football couldn't be broadcast as well. So whether the All Ireland League happens or not, the changes definitely do need to be made.
I suppose one thing, you mentioned travelling. I guess what the League of Ireland probably has its biggest issue is majority of clubs. Well, a fair chunk of the clubs will be Dublin. Is there any solution maybe to be brought in with the All Ireland League, like someone, for example, from Kerry would have known to support?
Yeah, that's a good one. But Kerry has a lot of facilities down there. I've been down there a good few times. And they have 2 or 3 really good clubs down there. So it wouldn't surprise me if a Kerry team came out and competed in the league. It wouldn't surprise me at all, because it's a very, very good footballing county.
In terms of transfer deadline day, for example, if you watch Sunderland Till I Die, you see the Will Grigg episode, and you saw it from the chairman's point of view. I suppose if you haven't been involved, to give it a little bit of flavour, what the agent's gone through in that month really for a transfer like that, and is the player involved at all, or did they just literally just keep the head down and let the agent sort it all out?
Yeah, well, the players and the players' families have, of course, it's all part of the process. They make the ultimate decision. There is always going to be, if you have so many different variants in a contract, and there's going to be red lines and stuff like that. So a lot of clubs insist on options for a player, and it's the only industry. Sports is the only industry that will even tolerate a one-way option, a club-only option. So it's always a pet grind for me is options. I try and avoid them like the plague because they're there for the benefit of the club. So sometimes there's a lot of ironing out to do that you have to build that in, and it's not an instant decision. You've got to get the board of directors to sign off on that. You've got to get the chief executive, the director of football. In the meantime, a player could be doing a medical. Some medicals last 2 days. One we did in January, the medical went on for 2 days. So you can't do that on a deadline because everybody be having a high blood pressure. So it's become a bit more settled in terms of the brinkmanship. Both clubs have been on both sides of it, so they don't really want to be let down at the last minute. So, as agents, we definitely will not scupper a deal. There won't be any unrealistic demands. There won't be any unrealistic. We're definitely not going to be the people to blame for a deal not going through. Sometimes between clubs, like I said earlier, it could be the instalments. Somebody wants a higher sell-on fee. It could be two owners don't like each other. It could be different variants. So you try and get as much of the business done before deadline day, and a sort of on deadline day, there's going to be the exceptions, but the 11 o'clock ones I think it would get fewer and far between.
Pat, for someone like, I think a lot of people looking at someone like Bukayo Saka at Arsenal, he's an academy graduate. He's only got, I think, 6 months to a year left on his contract, and it's running down. As an agent negotiating a contract, how strong a position are you in a case like that where he's an academy graduate? Clubs want to facilitate their academy graduates, and when you're trying to push that as an agent with 6 months left, is that a strong position to be in?
You're in a very strong position. Football's become very international. There are rules on maximum training compensation within FIFA. So, a player of somebody from the Arsenal pedigree and their training and their coaching will be of interest to a lot of the mainland Europe clubs who would be looking to catch a bargain. 250, 300,000 could get them a player if the contract runs out. If he stays in England, it goes to tribunal. If he refuses a contract with that club, and again, it's the player's prerogative. If he doesn't see much first team football ahead of him, and he's got to make a football decision as well as a financial decision, because if he's a winger and there's 4 wingers ahead of him at the club, then he's got to look after number one. And so it's not a case of running down a contract. It's a case of looking after himself and the best, and his agent, I'm sure, is looking after the best interest for the player as well. But clubs, are they do provide a great training scenario and whatever, but after a while within the academy, if there is no light at the end of the tunnel to get into that first team on a regular basis, players don't want to be in no man's land. They don't want to be just playing the Caribou Cup, and do you know what I mean? It's sort of he might be better off going to a championship club where he's going to be playing regularly, and he's got he's got 10, 15 years to go back into the Premiership, or he might be better off going abroad to Holland, to Belgium, or something like that, where he can get again regular first team football. It is a big carrot to a player.
And just on going abroad, you don't really see too many players. Maybe it's starting in the last couple of years, but I suppose you'd be an advocate of maybe getting a loan spell in mainland Europe, for example?
Yeah, 100%. Because you get the player out of his comfort zone. He's got to impress a new manager. He's got to impress new sets of fans. And he's probably playing more regularly than he would otherwise. He wouldn't have gone out on loan. So it doesn't have to be abroad. It could be a Premiership club who have, they're full with fantastic players, and the younger players, the anybody really under 23, and maybe goalies under 25 might be turning around and say, look, I need to get first team experience, and you've got the Championship and League One, and of course, the Championship level was very, very high, and League One level was very, very high. So it doesn't have to be to the top leagues around Europe, but for a player, it's important. I would say it's very, very important to get as much experience playing than just collecting a wage, basically.
Look, Pat, thanks for your time. But just before we go, just a couple of stories you might have from your 25 years in football. A few of the managers and players you might have dealt with. You might tell us the one about John Hartson down in Aberdeen.
Where it was up in Celtic. He was playing Celtic at home in a packed stadium, and John. We were staying with John at the weekend, and we were going out that night. I was up there with my partner, and I went and put a few quid on Celtic to beat them 7-0, and at half time, and John to score a hat trick. This
serious
is
odds on that, Pat.
There was, but not as much as you actually think it was. So anyway, at half time, there were 4-0 up at half time. A couple of stories there. One, John scored 2 goals, so I was thinking, hang on a minute, this could come in. And the second one was the Aberdeen supporters, who were unbelievable. They were like 800 to 1,000 in the top corner, and they didn't stop singing all the way through the second half. And they were singing, we're going to win 5-4, we're going to win 5-4, which was putting a smile on all the Celtic fans' faces. And then they started singing, can we play you every week, which was even funnier, Anyway, cut long story short, they were winning 7-0. John had scored 4 goals. I'm thinking, I should be doing this every week. And Martin O'Neill brought John off to get the accolation of the crowd. Scored. It was a brilliant day. It's a lovely sunny day, packed stadium. And he brought Shaun Maloney on, who went and then decided to score a 35-yard free kick and ruin my day. There we go. That was the story on that.
What a legend, Shaun Maloney.
Oh yeah, and I told him that as well, because I was up there with at Celtic, and I was talking to him, and we were a few of the players, and we were having a bit of lunch, and I told him that 35-yard free kick ruined my weekend. But anyway,
there's another one, Pat, that my dad always speaks about. I think it was the 2005 FA Cup semi-final, and you took Daniel and Dad over to it. I was too young at the time, and you were heavily involved with Ashley Cole at the time.
Yeah.
I think you were sitting in the hotel lounge with Sol Campbell and Thierry Henry or something.
Yeah, so basically, Daniel was a young kid, and he was playing up a little bit. So there was a little bit, if you don't behave yourself, you ain't going to the game, and you ain't going to meet the team.
It worked.
So, and it worked, because you started, all of a sudden you put manners on yourself. Anyway, so we went that afternoon after me and your dad were playing the good cop, bad cop with Daniel. And we went to, he couldn't believe, he just thought he was going to see Ashley, and Ashley brought everybody out to see him, so. Was it that weekend that you had all the photographs?
Yeah, it was my first game, and I just remember seeing Thierry Henry and Sol Campbell just quietly chatting away. It's peak Arsenal now.
And then I think Ashley said, "I've got to go now, guys. I've got a massage," and it was a sports massage. So there we go. Anyway.
And then Ashley Cole leaves a year or so later, and I start going to Arsenal matches. Yeah.
But listen, he then he had the nickname Mr. FA Cup, didn't he? So he went and won a lot of trophies with them. And listen, he did a great job for Arsenal, and he did a great job for Chelsea. And he won a lot. He's had a fantastic. I don't know how many FA Cups he won or how many titles. 7. Well, it's ridiculous. There we go.
Listen, Pat, we really appreciate you coming on, and thanks very much for your time.
Great to have you, Pat.
Good speaking to you, lads, and I'll speak to you soon.
Doesn't matter what you can be, the world's made up for you, so take advantage and be happy.
I think it's safe to say from that, Shaun, that Shaun Maloney's still rent-free in Pat's head anyway.
Yeah, and I think in most of ours as well. Do you remember his goal against Ireland in Celtic Park?
Yeah, he's had a few cracker free kicks in his time.
He was a good player. He won the FA Cup with Wigan as well. There's one of your stats for the day.
There you are. Shaun, give us a little bit of your thoughts on that. We had a good chat there, covering a lot of stuff that we didn't know, obviously, with the pay slips. I thought was particularly interesting, and of course his views on Irish football as well.
Well, the pay slip just goes, on average, he said 150, which is very interesting. It just goes to show how important your family is, your agent is, and making sure you save up that money, because, you know, when footballers finish, the well runs dry almost in some cases, and, you know, that's when mental health problems can kick in, when people and footballers have been so used from the age of 15, 16 for 18 years or whatever to getting up every day training, to then all of a sudden it stops. So it's very important you managed yourself wisely, and that's why the role of agents and your family is important. I think a few of his views on Irish football were very true and very accurate. I think the facilities in the League of Ireland need an urgent improvement. When you see the likes of Finn Harps, not to pick on them, and Eamon DC Park and some of the first division grounds, they're appalling. And if you're looking to get someone from Ireland back over to England, and you encourage a League 1, League 2 manager to come back over, and you can only bring them really to Tala or Turner's Cross, really, because otherwise it's not a good outlook. Some of the grounds, you know, the likes of Bows, I know they're pushing for a redevelopment, and hopefully that will come in a couple of years, but the ground there at the moment, half the stadium can't be filled because of health and safety. So you've got to, as the League of Ireland, they've got to improve infrastructure, especially around cleanliness and facilities for kids and families there. If you're a 35-year-old dad and mother of 2 kids, and you want to bring them to a match, you want to have facilities that are adequate.
Yeah, and I suppose the other issue that we touched on with Pat as well, to do with Irish football, would be the majority of clubs being in Dublin, or a vast majority of them being in Dublin. And, you know, you think of the likes of Kerry. I know Kilkenny previously had a League of Ireland team, but don't anymore. So, you know, we had the emergence of Cabinteely, which was great, but at the end of the day, it was just another Dublin club. And without having people in rural Ireland being able to support a team, you know, the League of Ireland will always struggle, particularly up against the likes of the Premier League, you know. Well,
the thing about rural clubs is it's very easy to say, oh, we'll get a club in Mayo, a club in Kerry, but at the end of the day, those clubs need to be well supported, well funded. They need volunteers to run them, and it's very hard in this day and age to go and say, right, we're starting a club up in Kerry. There might be 1,000 there at the first game, and then all of a sudden it drops off, performances drop off, and then you're left with massive debt. And the FEI, certainly where they would have thought it might have been an idea, you know, they've done a lot of work at 15s, 17s, 19s to get regional teams into the League of Ireland set up. I think because of this virus now and a lack of funding in the FEI, this is only going to get pushed further and further down their pecking order.
No, it's exactly. And listen, if you found that interesting with Pat, and you'd like to keep an eye on some of the footballers he has, do check out Quorum Sports on all social media. QUORUM. We'll put the link in our description. We've a number of exciting episodes planned over the next few weeks, and I suppose Shaun will have a small little preview of what we have next week.
Yeah, so next week we'll speak to Charlie Rock, former Blackrock SET winning captain in 2013. Also went into the Leinster Academy and played a few times with the senior men's province side. So we're looking forward to speaking to Charlie, getting his views on Irish rugby, on schoolboy rugby, and it'll be a fascinating chat. He was a neighbour of ours growing up, so we've great time for Charlie, and we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, a few stories there as well.
Absolutely, all good, I hope.
If you liked what you heard, get us on social media at Tackling Sport. We do want to hear from you if there's any topic you want to discuss, or somebody you feel will be a good fit for us. We're going to be posting a lot of content on our website over the next few weeks in terms of articles. If you are interested in even writing for us, do get in touch. Give us feedback on what you'd like to hear on the podcast. We do want to hear from you. Our website's tacklingsport.com. Or you can email us, editor@tacklingsport. I want to give a shout out to Madison Front for the theme music. It's their single Sleep Off, and we're actually going to play out this week. And I feel something that is a good idea, Shaun, is that every week we might play out with a different song from an artist. So we have a couple of people in mind the next few weeks. But again, if that's something that interests you, want to get your song out there, do get in touch with us. Every week we're going to play out with a song.
Yeah, that idea of supporting local is very important at the moment. support your local club, support your local band, and Madison Front are a great way to end show 1, and we look forward to many more shows.
Other than that, just to say, please rate, review, like, subscribe if you'd like to hear. We do want to hear feedback as well, so do get in touch with ourselves at Tackling Sport, as I said, all social medias. Other than that, it's for Madison Front to play us out. It's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me. It's like the bit and pointless when they go. It's goodbye.
Yeah,
from
I've
Richard.
actually made a bit of a mess of that. So it's a goodbye from Shaun.
Goodbye.
And a goodbye from me. It's Madison Front. Good night.
Slán go fóill.
I won't be what they want, 'cause I can't do what it says on my tin. So I sink myself into my thoughts, but they still say I don't do anything. And I'm lying again, 'cause I'm not content about going out and worrying nothing. And the things you said, they've already left my head. My mind's gone running. My mind's gone running. I want love, but I'm scared I'll have to give it away. I need a lift up sometimes to get me through my day. It's a pity she wiped the smile from my face. Come with me, I'll be glad if you took her place. It doesn't matter what you can be, the world's made up for you. So take advantage and be happy, 'cause life's too short, now we're talking again. And it feels so right, 'cause you're in my head every day and night. Then when it gets tough and I've had enough, I'll sleep off. Now there's no more simple minds, because they all see what we see now. And you've gotta just give it time, and it'll all fix itself together somehow. And we're walking around with our heads in the clouds, knowing that we're searching for something. And we busted out of the crowd we found to be just another bubble of nothing. Just another bubble of nothing. I want love, but I'm scared I'll have to give it away. I need a lift up sometimes to get me through my day. It's a pity she wiped the smile from my face. Come with me, I'll be glad if you took her place. It doesn't matter what you can be, the world's made up for you. So take advantage and be happy, 'cause life's too short, now we're talking again. And it feels so right, 'cause you're in my head every day and night. Then when it gets tough and I've had enough, I'll sleep off. 'Cause where we've been, we're just dreamers, you deceivers. Better leave us alone, alone, alone. 'Cause where we've been, we're just dreamers, you deceivers. Better leave us alone, alone. It doesn't matter what you can be, the world's made up for you. So take advantage and be happy. And it doesn't matter get your